Hello, I'm Alex Thurner, and our host, Jose Garcia Moreno, will join us shortly. The overall purpose of Advocate is to capture people with their complex and rich identities and show you who they are through their own stories. Today's episode covers a topic crucial to documented and undocumented populations living in the United States. As a companion to what you are about to hear, we are publishing a legal presentation as an archive, spoken in Spanish. Today's episode includes a conversation with Sandra Hernadez of the Loyola Immigrant Justice Clinic and two LMU employees leading the Center for Religion and Spirituality. We now join Jose in conversation with Sandra Hernadez.
Here at Advocate, we're really very interested in giving voice and space to presentations and talks like the one you had a couple of weeks ago at Loyola Marymount University that are so important, but that people may not be aware of them or didn't have the chance to actually attend them. So your presentation guides all residents and citizens through their constitutional rights. And these rights belong to anyone living in the United States. My first question to you is, how do these protections apply to LMU students and their families? When protections do they have if ICE comes looking for someone on campus?
Thank you, Jose. So I want to express that the constitutional rights that we are afforded, as you mentioned, are for everybody that is living in the United States. So any LMU students or parents, if they have, if they're living on campus or an apartment or living at home with parents, any dwelling, any place that you consider home, you have a privacy right. So if ICE were to come and ask to search your home or come and arrest an individual, they are prohibited from entering your home unless you have given them authorization to enter. And if you do not give them authorization, the only way they can enter is if they have been issued a judicial warrant from a judge, and that judicial warrant is fully and properly executed. And so that, quickly, for anybody that did not get to listen to the presentation, it needs to be signed by a judge. It needs to have the correct address of the dwelling they want to enter. It needs to have the date of when they want to enter, and they're only given 14 days thereafter. And they need to have the name of the individual that they want to arrest. However, we do know what has changed in this new administration is that everybody is essentially at risk, in the sense of if they happen to be looking for one specific individual, but then they come to the knowledge of another family member being undocumented. Maybe in previous administrations, they would have looked at priorities to see, okay, well, this is not the individual we were looking for. They don't have an arrest history. We'll just leave them. It's not necessarily the same case under this administration. So that we have seen. There is no priorities under this administration. Everybody is essentially fair game on being detained.
Do you ever wish history could be used as a thought experiment? What I'm asking is because in political, and this is another question, in political charged times as we are living right now, is there a lens, in your opinion, that reveals that mass deportation lacks moral or ethical values?
Yeah, what I think is immoral is that there are many individuals who actually already have a pending application to be able to gain protected status in the United States, or who may have eligibility to be able to remain in the United States. However, they're not given that opportunity to appear before an immigration judge. That's what I think is immoral, because they could have stopped and halted that deportation, and they're not given their constitutional rights to appear before a judge. to the right to an attorney. Many times they're given a document to sign without it being interpreted. They use very harsh fear tactics, saying that if you don't sign, we're going to take your children away. And that's immoral. That's immoral because it's illegal. The Constitution, if this president is claiming that he's using lawful tactics, right, and that he wants everybody to abide by the law, then they shall too. They should also be using constitutional legal procedures to be able to remove individuals that should need to be removed, but also if those that have eligibility, have the right to their attorney, have the right to have documents interpreted, he should give those same rights. He should also with his agents be following the law.
I think that we all understand that democracy is traditionally a society guided by the rule of law. But it feels to me that there's like this idea in the current administration that they rather break the law and keep on pursuing for their political agenda in regards to deportation.
There's families don't even know where they were sent, and that is very tragic because there's not much that an attorney might be able to do at this point, and it just changed someone's life and the children that were left behind. So that is tragic. I do believe in, given the experience that I also have had, there are individuals that have come to the country and who are immigrants and who have committed crimes too, right? I do believe that there's, not everybody is innocent, but as this country stands for, you're innocent until proven guilty. And that has not been afforded to every individual. And that's the sad part.
I have this perception as not scientific, based, and probably I'm incorrect. But it's this perception that I have had in the last month that and because you're in contact with these communities, probably you can tell me no, that's not true. I have seen less traffic in the city. Do you think that people that are at risk are not going out to the streets? They're not using public transportation or driving their cars around the city?
Absolutely. Yes. Even the Know Your Rights presentations, we have intentionally done them online. Because when we do them in person, it seems like they are afraid to come out. They don't want to be associated currently because they don't know if the presentation is going to be rated, right? And so we have seen that the week when Trump took office, schools had very low attendance for their students because families were afraid that their kids were going to get picked up, that they were going to get picked up, that they were going to be separated. I I'm starting to see a little bit more out in traffic, but it's not the same. It's not the same as before. People are afraid to spend money because if there is and they are deported, they are detained, they're gonna have to hire an attorney. They're gonna have to pay a bond. They're gonna have to make travel arrangements. So even spending money within the lower income communities where we do serve, it's impacting the economy. It's impacting those regions that are primarily recited by immigrants in general. And I'm not talking about just undocumented immigrants. I'm talking about residents, even naturalized citizens who are afraid that their naturalization is going to get taken away, and we have to educate the community like that's not possible, right? We have to go out there and let them know we don't want you to live in fear either, because that's what the government wants us to be.
So deportations have been happening across political regimes. Past generations in the United States have feared we have feared the overreach of political power, which is interesting as this administration is reducing the federal workforce, but at the same time, paradoxically, is trying to develop this larger grip on society. What laws will help the United States limit the powers of government for the safeguard of civil rights, in your opinion?
I think as long as we continue challenging all of the executive orders that have been absolutely outside of his power. For example, something as blatant as stripping individuals that were born on this territory when he wanted to take away the birthright citizenship. That is completely unconstitutional. Anybody can blatantly and clearly see that. But yet he's taking this attitude of, because I'm the president and con I want to completely change what previous administrations have been doing. He has taken an extreme um point of action for many laws and orders that he's trying to do. So I think as long as uh litigants are challenging these in court, we have hope. President Trump has tried to eliminate a lot of parole programs, TPS programs, and there is litigation pending, and so that gives us a glimpse of hope to be able to protect certain individuals to be able to remain here, um, and also the community knowing their constitutional rights. We had never seen them, and what I mean them is we had never seen the Department of Homeland Security even having a hard time, right, with the idea, and even President now antagonizing immigration attorneys because of how much we have come and empowered and educated the community about this. Because now we're holding them to do their work in the lawful way, right? Now it's not like, okay, we're just gonna open the door just because you have a badge. No, now we have our rights, we know our rights, and we're willing to use them, and we're gonna hold you to those to do your job according to what the law requires. And that comes from understanding that everybody is playing a pivotal role right now. Even the most recent arrived undocumented immigrant to the best expert immigration attorney, right? Everybody is playing a critical role to empower, protect, and hold accountable the government as to everything that they're doing.
I think that we tend to generalize the phenomenon of immigration. Like there's like what is happening in Mexico is all this displacement because of the cartel wars, and there's like migration that is happening internally in Mexico, and unless you are like really open to understand migration, you will tend to actually create categories that put everything in the same package, and it's not like that at all. That's one of the things that I understood about in my not in in the depth that you have in terms of understanding communities of migrants, but in my uh, uh, let's say uh, practical experience. That's what I found about myself, that there's so much that we ignore about the phenomenon of migration.
Yeah, and safety, right? Safety. I am every day, because my husband and I travel to Tijuana. We're Christians, and we go there with one of the pastors who has a, I don't, maybe you've heard of it, as Embajadores de Jesús, Templo de Embajadores de Jesús in Tijuana. And he has housed many migrants there temporarily, sometimes long term during the previous Trump 1.0. Um, and when you really sit down to hear their stories, a lot of them don't want to leave their home country. Nobody wants to leave everything they know, everything they've owned, their family, without knowing what's going to happen next. But sometimes they had stories, and when you hear and you really humanize the reason for why they're leaving is because maybe their husband was decapitated. Maybe they've lost every single family members to drug cartels, right? It's very sad to realize that There are some individuals who have faced things that no human being should ever have to face. And I'm so thankful for even just having a pillow on my bed, having a safe place that I can call home without the worry of like, is somebody going to break into at Templo Embajadores de Jesus during Trump 0.10? They were only staying in tent. And that was their home, a little tent, right? And now it's bunk bed. And but that was all they owned was in a backpack. And that, to be watching of like around and being like, okay, what's gonna happen next? And something that we take for granted, right? Even a cup of water, um, light, being able to shower. And I know that every government, every country has laws. I understand that. And I am as an attorney, I am to uphold those laws. But I also understand that when we're dealing with this, it should be done in a humanized way. It should be done where everybody is appraised of their rights so that when somebody is removed, they were already given that opportunity and they understood. I just consulted with the man who came back because he was unfairly removed, and he was always thinking like, "What happened in my case? I had an opportunity. Why did they not give me an opportunity?" So he came back because he just feels it was unfair and unjust to him, and it was unjust to him. And I think when we're able to it's so easy. It's so easy to say, well, they came here unlawfully, so everything thereafter is unlawful. Well, no, it's not, right? Especially when you think about what caused them to come and even the rhetoric, the words that they use can be so inhumane, can be so harsh, without even, I wonder if these individuals have ever heard even one migrant in their story for leaving. And that is what breaks my heart, in regards to all of this, because it's very easy to have opinions without really having had the opportunity to see them for who they are. And it's a soul. It's somebody that I think anybody, even myself, if my daughter's life was at risk, I would do anything, anything to protect them. And it's just it's a very emotionally tolling work we do, but it's very rewarding in that we can educate, we can try to defend as many, we can try to file as many cases, and in a system that many times ignores, maybe just sees it as another number, just any other migrant. But no, that person has a full story from the moment they were created, they were, brought into this life. They had a purpose in this world. And I know that a lot of migrants have become so much more stronger because of their journey, and they know how resilient they are, especially when you see these unaccompanied minors who are traveling by themselves at the age of 13. To believe that even a teenager, an American teenager doesn't even know how to do the basics, right? But yet there's a 13-year-old migrant who has traveled through all of America to get to the United States. That is amazing. That is something that I'm so beyond proud of all my clients. Yeah, in that they should be proud of themselves as well, right? And so we wanna honor their lives, we wanna honor their stories, and even though we might not get the result they want, at least they would not feel like they were unjustly removed or something was not done, as best as we could. I think above even personally, right? Even above the laws that Trump is taking, I think what angers me more is that governments that have not taken the responsibility to take care of their nationals and their citizens who have fallen to decades of corruption, to decades of violence, and who have done very little to try to change it and have caused, because like I said from the beginning of the presentation, individuals don't want to leave. They don't want to leave everything they know, all their family. And so my frustration comes primarily from those governments who have have not taken the responsibility as much as they should at this point to stop those push factors for migration.
What can we share with LMU students about understanding that this is real, this is happening, and that it's important that they know as much as they can about their legal status?
It's very important, as many individuals might be in this country out of fear who have never even tried to ask if there's a way for them to have lawful status in the United States. I think for the first time during our consultations, I'm seeing individuals who have been here 20, 30 years plus who have never talked to an immigration attorney. And for the first time, they're trying to seek their options because so far in decades, they've been fine. Nobody has, come and look for them. And now they're seeing the reality of it, that everybody, like I mentioned earlier, is a fair game to being arrested and detained. And so it is very important that everybody who is undocumented, that they would seek legal consultations to see if there's an option viable. You would be shocked that there's some individuals that go from thinking that they're completely undocumented to even possibly having US who are already US citizens because they discover that, hey, wait, my parents were United States citizens, and now I have citizenship, and all I have to do is get a certificate recognizing that, right? Those are the little gold nuggets that we, happen to come across, and we look forward to those. But anybody else who have never maybe have heard of a program and they might be eligible to do and apply for it here in the United States with very, very low risk. And so we encourage those, but we also encourage those who do have lawful permanent residence, and we see that a lot. So if students have grandparents or parents who have green card holders, parents or grandparents who have had their green cards for 20, 10 years and who are just been like, "Oh, I'll get to citizenship later. I'll get to citizenship later," or I don't need to become a youth. This is the time to become a naturalized citizen. This is the time to get citizenship because that's the best mode of protection. So if there's any student listening to us and they have a loved one who has a green card and that green card holder has just put out citizenship, this is the time to pursue that remedy by consulting with an immigration attorney. We offer free representation and we help with the fee waiver as well if they're low income. So the entire process ends up being a free service and a free application. So why not take advantage so that way everything's already settled with immigration and they don't ever have to worry about it.
Oh, thank you so much, Sandra, and thank you so much for your presentation. This is what we need now. We need clarity about what is really happening, what are the legal paths for people, what you should expect, and not bury your head into the sand, but actually, become aware and take control of your own life. And I really admire, what you do and that you're in the front lines and you're fighting for our communities. So thank you again, Sandra. Do you want to add anything else?
I will just say that, as I sometimes say, my know your rights, let's not live in fear. We should be very thankful for the day that we have today. Enjoy the time that we have with our loved ones, with our kids, and don't, listen to the fear mongering. Be aware, be educated, but enjoy today because tomorrow is never promised.
Don't go anywhere. There's more to come with Jose and our other guests coming up next.
Okay, so for this segment, we have two dear friends of ACTI. We have Loyola Marymount University Center for Religion and Spirituality Director, Bob Hurteau. Hi, Bob.
Hey, good to be here.
And the center's Assistant Director, Elsy Arevalo.
Pleasure to be here.
Oh, such a pleasure to have you. Before we begin, can I just ask Bob that you are going to retiring pretty soon? And so you're relinquishing your role as director for the center. And you have been here for decades, right?
Yeah, I came in 2005 and we've seen a bit of growth, especially in our work with the Spanish-speaking population over these years.
Yes. So this is really very interesting, and I think it's very. And first of all, thank you for all your service. It's with this decades of work serving immigrants and linguistically diverse residents. Bob? What do we say in the context of what we're seeing now? How can we close that imaginary chasm that separates citizens from immigrants? How can we make people aware that those people are not just enemies, are not just like people that have no rights? It's people that are migrating because they're in search of a deal. How can we make the general audience empathize with migration and the problem of migration and the humanity of migrants?
Well, that is the question of the hour, isn't it, Jose? I would say two things. I always think of Father Greg Boyle's work at Homeboys. And in other words, this is a ministry to formerly incarcerated gang members that sets them on a different pathway. And his whole focus is that we are really going to be fine when we stop thinking that, there's these folks out on the margins and, they're kind of disposable. There's a different way to think about it, is that we really do matter to each other, and that our relationship one to the other does affect all of us. I would also say within the church that this is a group that's hard to ignore. This is that's how I come especially to working with the Latino community, is that our focus is on who is going to minister and who is going to be working and helping Catholic parishes to assume their responsibilities or pastoral work. And it is often people, from the various linguistic communities. And a very big one in Southern California is the Spanish-speaking community. These are people who day in, and the ones that take our courses are people who day in and day out are thinking very clearly about their faith, and are some of them taking important responsibilities in ministry in their faith.
Yes. Oh, just to set up our audience within the context of what the Center for Religion and Spirituality does at LMU, Elsy, can you just enlighten us of the important work that you're doing?
Yeah, the mission of CRS is really to be the university's outreach to the community, and we provide workshops, events, certificate programs, education in the areas of theology and spirituality in both English and Spanish. So we're sort of a bridge between academia and the community, what people are actually living and experiencing, and theological, moral, ethical thought.
What is the demographics of that community of students?
It's interesting. We have the gamut of age range. I would say anybody maybe more average is over 40. Mm-hmm. Over 40 to, I've had a student in a course that was like 80, taking her first online computer class, using Zoom. So age range varies, very diverse. A lot of the Latino community in Spanish enjoy taking our courses, even if they're bilingual. There's a real value in processing your experience of God in the language you relate to God in.
But primordially, it's a Latino community, or not necessarily?
No, I would say that 60 to 70% of our students are Latino. Yeah. We also have a program for Black Catholics as well. It's called Contemporary Black Catholic Spirituality Certificate, something we're very proud to have developed. It's another piece of how we feel like there are groups in the church that maybe haven't gotten the attention that they need or the services that they need, and we try to, in coordination with the local church, with the Archbishop and the Office of Religious Education of the Archdiocese, to reach out and make resources available to those students. We also have Filipinos, Vietnamese, Korean students as well, although we do not offer programming in those languages, not yet.
We have been surrounding this episode about the rights for immigrants. What is the reading of the temperature of the Latino community right now, and the idea of making our community understand their rights, specifically at this moment, which is really important. What do you think?
Well, in the first place, I was extremely grateful for this resource becoming available and available online. That was really a wonderful opportunity for people to understand what to do when their rights are threatened, and understand what recourse they have. Okay, I noticed in the podcast, in the broadcast, there was a couple of parts. Right, there was the kind of the hopeful part about, look, here's some defensive measures you can take if they. If you're being questioned, you don't have to answer, and so forth. And they went through a whole list of things. It was wonderful. But then there's the other side of it too, where the mood was very, very, very serious. In other words, this is such a vulnerable population that they explain what to do when someone is being deported, and like how can you prepare for that very unfortunate circumstance. And of course, it was that too was incredibly helpful, but you realize very sobering. Elsy, how did you understand the presentation or the experience you're hearing in your courses?
Well, likewise, just grateful that the information was available. And, I mentioned that we started this course last Saturday, and one of the questions we asked the participants is, what brought you to the course? And, what does this moment in time mean to you? And whether somebody is documented or undocumented, I think the immigrant community is equally affected, either by having relatives that are affected or serving in church and parishes, communities that are vulnerable, or even the dialogue about immigrants, just help making people kind of question themselves, their worth, their dignity. One of the exercises we did is we asked people, how do you see yourself? How do you think others see you? And how does God see you? And I'm still processing the experience from Saturday, but it was incredibly important that we're having the conversation, and even that as many immigrants as we have in this country, the conversation about what the immigrant experience means, it's something that is still sort of hidden, not discussed very often, and yet it's such a common experience for so many people in America.
This is very interesting because both you and I are immigrants, and so it resonates on many levels, right? It's not only the legal aspect, but the humane aspect of what it means to immigrate to another land, right? And I think both of us have had like a very virtuous experience in immigration because we went through the legal ways and came to this country and blah, blah, blah. But there's a lot of people that actually are holding the fire in their hands, the fire of hope in their hands to cross through these unimaginable distances sometimes. And they go through deserts and mountains and rivers. And there's like those, which is not my case, that suffer their migration journey as a daily punishment. And they remain lost in this like transitional limbo of not being there but not being here, which is like it really hurts people emotionally, psychologically, and you metamorphosize into like a nowhere children and nowhere women and nowhere men. And this is why when I contemplate the invisibles, as that people will deny that they are there as long as they serve you in some way. Right? They serve you your food in the restaurant, or they pick up, the cotton in the land. But I'm humble with enormous admiration for these people because the greatest percent of those people that migrate are honest, good people, right? And I was even though I had like this virtuous way of migrating here, I was incredibly saddened for a long time because people think that when you migrate, what you're trying to get is a legal paper or a document. But in fact, for me, the experience is that when you migrate, what you want is to be accepted. Accepted as who you are, as Elsie or as Jose or as Bob, right? It's not that you have an accent or you blah, 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 blah. It's just treat me as you care for me, right? That I'm one of the community. And I think that's one of the things that I have always deeply impact my heart when I see, these caravans of people walking through the jungle. And I say, it's almost like biblical proportions, isn't it, Bob?
What you're talking about reminds me of what I heard a DACA recipient say about 6 or 8 years ago right here at LMU, speaking on the topic of immigration. And she was very firm about how much it wore her out to try to be accepted, and that she came to the conclusion. Of course, it's a human fact. I think, fact of human life. You can't make anybody accept you, but at the same time, it was like a very very bitter experience, shall we say. Now, as a DACA, she was at that point protected and good, but at the same time realizing this is a grudging thing, and the general way people are looking at me is like, well, you don't really belong. It's how she experienced that. It's how she experienced that, and you say to yourself, this is rough stuff. Migration is an important thing for many people. I think that here in Southern California, many people are from everywhere. Yes. Okay, not just other countries, but other parts of the United States or other parts of California. It doesn't matter. Every family has a story. But the problem is that I think that especially with race in our country, is that it's become like a commonplace to just assume that people in a whole class or a whole racial identity, they're just those people that, are trying to take advantage of our country, and they don't respect our laws. And we hear this over and over. I guess your listeners probably are well acquainted with this. It's hard. It's hard to imagine that on a human level how we dehumanize each other so frequently.
Yeah. There's like this idea, which is like crazy, that illegal immigrants, or not illegal, undocumented immigrants in this country do not pay taxes, and they do.
Of course they do. Yes.
And it's billions and billions of dollars, and they don't get the benefit out of paying that. Right? It's just like yes, but it's like a. Right. I'm going to say something probably which is like out of context, and probably people are going to disagree, but it's almost like an apartheid system in the U.S. It's like people that are here, and they're allowed to be here because there's a benefit, lower labor costs, blah, 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 as long as they remain silent and they remain in their corner of darkness and they don't try to raise their hand, you can be here, right? But it's almost like a system of semi-slavery.
Well, that's there is even a historical precedent there that the immigrant labor from Mexico was thought of as kind of like slavery without the legal bondage, as it were. Neither free nor slave was the phrase that was used.
Which I've seen the photos of when they had this system of bringing temporary agricultural workers into the United States, and they were spraying them with pesticides before they came into the country. Is just brutal.
The other thing is, I'm glad we're bringing this up. There is a historical perspective, and I think, a century ago, it was the Italian Americans that were rejected in the ways of immigration. In this part of the country, it still was Latinos and Japanese that were also rejected as well. But these other groups have more or less not been the continued object of anti-immigrant ire. But we have seen this over and over again with peoples from Latin America and peoples from Asia and peoples from Africa as well. We might as well admit. And I think that there is a dynamic that I think it unfortunately repeats itself, is that we are a country of migrants, but that we also have this tendency that once inside the country, there's a tendency to let me pull back and close the door behind me now, that we can paint the picture of that good immigration happened in that time and bad immigration is happening now. That's something we see over and over again, and we've seen it historically.
Yes. What do you think, Elsy?
Well, it just kind of makes me think about what this time means. And one of the ways that I've been kind of processing and thinking about it is that God's grace, or if you call it the movement of love, wants to bring into light that which is in darkness. Mm-hmm. And so the opportunity for this moment, I think, is for all of us as a community to discern and consider where are my boundaries of love? Who is worthy of love? Who is worthy of dignity? Who is worthy of taking up space in the world? Right. And so if we were to look at this, whatever political point of view people have or not, but for our community that's centered on like faith, or even like the younger generation, which is so good at focusing on the energy of love and grace and just those higher values, right? Like, what is this asking of us? Beyond me being an immigrant and this being a issue that personally affects my sense of, self or connectedness to other, which that is there. I think it's a question for everybody. Mm-hmm. What is this moment in history asking each of us to see and discern within ourselves? Who do we think is worthy or unworthy?
And as you know, Pope Francis has been emphasizing that very question throughout his pontificate. He especially in recent times, since January 20th, shall we say, this year, he's emphasized Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan, that, that is the standard we use, is that there's not an exclusion you can set up. There's someone who's going to be outside God's love and outside your responsibility to love. No, it's everybody.
And one of the reasons why I feel so drawn to focus on, for instance, this course on helping the immigrant heal their own sense of self, which ultimately is the only thing we can control, right? It's like, what is it for you to do in your own inner work, right? Because we can't change a whole communities. Right. And it's, as you mentioned, Bob, it's exhausting work to say, I'm going to convince everybody that another human being is worthy. It is just an undertaking that only grace, I think, can achieve, right? But what is it for me to do, right, is the inner work that matters. But one of the things that we invite people to consider is just that the whole history of the Bible, all the stories in the Bible are stories of immigration. And stories of, people having to flee home and slavery and being unseen and the oppressed communities. And it's incredible that this is still a discovery that in God's wisdom and in God's mercy, He chose a people that were rejected and, weak in the eyes of the world, to show His grace in His face and her face, God's face. So there's something uniquely important about this conversation that goes beyond a particular community. And again, I think it has to do with grace, wanting to bring light the limits of love.
Yeah, and just supporting what you're saying, our own faculty here, Professor Brett Hoover, has written a bit on immigration and faith, and one of his repeated themes is that it's just not like a marginal topic in Scripture or in the tradition of the church. It's over and over. Jesus himself was a refugee.
Yeah, it always comes back to me, this idea of, for those of us who have migrated, there's like this idea that, the first time that I left, I was 19. I came to work at Disney. I mean, again, it's not that I went through the border and blah, blah, blah. But what is true is that what I found is that once you leave home, you're never able to go back to that same home, right? Because you go back years after, and people have moved, and the circumstances are different. So you never can go back to the idea of your childhood home, right? And migration is, and I think the universality of migration is that we're all, regardless if you're not moving of your country, you're always on a journey towards finding where is your place, right? Which there's a lot of inner migration in the United States. A lot of people are born somewhere and they go and do their life in some other state, blah, blah, blah. But what is really interesting for me is that there's like this mythological idea of the center of the house is also the fire, the hearth is the fire within, right? And you're looking to turn that on wherever you are, right? To make that place feel the real home, right? And there's like this connection with there's like this French philosopher who actually talks about the concept of hospitality, which is so important for those of us who have migrated, is those who open the door to their home and made us share their table with them. And for me, that was very important, because when I came here to LMU, the first person that ever invited me to a dinner was Father Caro and Abby Armstrong. And I didn't know how important they were at the moment at LMU. And it was just like, I was just thinking how cool they are and how funny they are. But the idea that they were so integrated and so spiritual by understanding how important that was for me, it's what it makes me realize that hospitality, the way that you treat the people that you do not know, is what actually makes you closer to God in a way. So because, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just feeling such a, that's so much what Father Caro and Abby were doing there is so similar to what we try to do in our programs every day, is to tell the community, you have a place here at LMU. Who cares if some of the people don't call them students, whatever, but come, there's something here for you. To offer that and to offer a pathway to greater learning or to greater insight into one's faith or one's journey in life, to make that available is such a, I don't know. If I think about my 20 years of doing it, I'm very, very happy about that. Is to welcome people to LMU.
Elsy, you just started the course, right? You were telling me. Tell us a little bit about what the newest one.
The newest one, yeah, the spirituality of pilgrimage, which is really the immigrant experience and what that's like for people. It meets 9 times, about once a month. It's kind of a retreat experience each time, and we're looking at the different facets of the experience. This idea of like, what does it mean to be home or to not feel at home? Your sense of self and that really ultimately, like how we see ourselves is the most important question. There's that saying of Jesus, and I'll say it in Spanish, tú ves la paja en el ojo de la persona, pero no la viga en el tuyo. How would you translate that?
You see the speck in your brother's or sister's eye, but you don't see the beam in your own eye. And
in this case, what I've thought about is that sometimes that beam in our own eyes is the way we see ourselves.
Right.
And that's the healing that we're inviting people to do.
Yes.
So that they may see themselves as God sees them and heal that which needs to be healed within themselves.
Do you all look at in the program the sense of ni aquí ni allá, ni de aquí ni de allá?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
Which means, of course, not feeling like you belong in one place or the other.
Mm-hmm. I think there's sort of three essential questions. Am I safe? Am I loved?
Right.
Do I belong?
Yes.
And I think those are just human questions in general, but they take a particular...
They're amplified.
Amplified by the experience. Yeah. We look at, for example, the stages of grief. And where do you find yourself in your journey? You know, anger, denial. Some people, I think, never resolved that they, in fact, moved. And there's always this sense that, you know, someday I'll go back. Or so there's a lot there. And I think I mentioned it just feels so tender. We also look at immigrant stories in the Bible, because I think that is a pathway through which people can discover their own dignity.
Yeah. Which one is your favorite?
Oh, gosh. Well, the Holy Family, for sure. If I had to pick one, just even thinking about Mary and Mary's experience. You know, in Spanish, we have this idea of diosidencia. It's a coincidence, but it's really not. It's a God-led coincidence. So what a diosidencia that we are starting the program the week before Holy Week, like the Saturday before Holy Week. And the invitation that I give students this week, you know, no readings other than reading the scriptural passages, the experience of Jesus, the experience of rejection, how the law treated him, what that experience might have been for Mary to accompany her son in that, and to allow themselves to be with Jesus, Mary, and his friends, the friends that walked away, the friends that denied him, the friends that betrayed him, the people that shouted and those that stayed quiet. I think it's such a gift to be starting this program in this moment, you know, in our Lenten season, but also the invitation to be with Jesus in the resurrection as well. So come Sunday, what do you think that was like for Mary? What do you think that was like for the disciples to find hope after such hopeless darkness?
Hey, Bob. So, you know, Elsy and I were, Elsy from Salvador, myself from Mexico, but you're technically an immigrant as well.
Technically, because I was born to U.S. parents in Germany, but came back to the United States when I was 8 months old. However, I did spend 12 years living in southern Peru.
Which, by the way, your Spanish is great.
Well, thank you. Agradecido. Thank you very much. Yeah, and an experience that definitely impacted me. Feeling, okay, so privilege, right? I mean, a U.S. passport holder working in Peru. I mean, a lot of doors were opened. I was working with the church and this sort of thing. But really became friends and really just love the time that I spent working with the Peruvians in their church on their ideas and their projects, and you know, feeling we were talking about biblical stories a little earlier that we identify with, and I think I would say the story of Ruth from the Old Testament is one I really identify with, because she was not part. She married into the people of Israel. She was from another land. She was an immigrant, right? But was accepted by the people of Israel, and becomes somewhat takes on something of a heroic role in their history. I don't think I've had that part of the heroic role, but at the same time, I would say I felt so welcomed and so very much felt that the time in Peru was a gift that I continue to process, actually, even 30 years later now.
You know what? It's really fascinating. It just came to me that, you know, I was part of the strategic planning committee when David Burcham was elected Well, when he was elected president, and it was his strategic plan, and I was part of that group. And one of the flags that I was carrying on in the committee is that I always thought that LMU was monolithically linguistically. Everything has to deal through the English language. Very few people speak and learn at a university level any other language. And I think that not that I'm tapping in my hand because this came through my education, which I was raised in Mexico City but went to a bilingual school. And then the family of my mom, they were French. So there's like more than two languages that I can speak. But what I mean is not about me, is that the idea of understanding a language actually gives you another perspective of understanding the world. And I think that we don't reflect as much on how important it is for this society to learn more than one language.
I could not more agree. And I worked on a third language when I was in Peru. It was the Aymara language, so the people there as well. And it's absolutely true. You cannot speak well another language without adopting some new wiring in your head. Correct. About how the world looks and feels and is experienced. What did they say? Monolingualism is a disease of the tongue that affects the vision.
Oh, beautiful. Oh, wow. I'm going to steal that. Yes.
It's not mine, though. I'll find out. I'll get you the citation.
Oh, anyway. Yes. No, languages. It also gives you it puts you in a position of not being the dominant individual in a conversation.
Yes, language
on a
learning.
Table.
Yes, you become a child.
You become a child. You become more humble because you're trying to learn how to express to other in their own language what is it that you're feeling.
And you do experience these same questions that immigrants experience. But again, the privilege around it has just made the questions not as severely experienced. Right. But this question of how do I fit in? How do I belong? Right. Always thinking about it.
Yes. Well, you're bilingual as well, Elsy.
Yeah, and definitely it expands your mind. The way you look at people. I'm grateful. That's part of the discovery that we're also inviting people to do, is that the immigrant experience has so many gifts.
That's right.
It opens up your heart, your mind in so many ways that you normally wouldn't have. Because certainly racism and prejudice exists in our own country. Right. But when you move somewhere else, then they become relevant issues that you really want to tune into and notice in a different way. So, that's part of the gift, the expanded perspective, being able to name something is what allows you to see it sometimes, and some cultures are better at naming certain experiences than others.
Acti will conclude this episode with a reading from Mayra Torres. Mayra is a theology graduate student at LMU who recently shared her essay on campus. We hope her words amplify the reality and importance of listening to the stories shared in this episode.
God's sovereignty over borders, the trickster spirit of the oppressed. I want to thank the Mary Milligan Lecture Committee for the opportunity to present today on the theme of spirituality for a time of fear and division, a theme that not only resonates in our present moment, but is also at the heart of my research. In my current thesis, I explored how the spirituality of La Lucha emerges within the undocumented community during times of fear and division. Through the prophetic voices of undocumented Latinas, I examine how their lucha is expressed in their sharing of lo cotidiano, the everyday, the quotidian. Experiences with oppression through Spanish-language Catholic radio. I also question whether these radio spaces serve as sites of refuge, solidarity, and justice, or whether they fall into oppressive silence, failing to quench the spiritual thirst of those crying, "Let my people go." Throughout history, in moments of fear and diaspora, sacred scripture and cultural memory have preserved the voices of marginalized women, offering a plural mujerista theology of election. One that reveals God's justice through unexpected means. Again and again, we see that divine liberation does not align with dominant expectations of law and justice, but often through those who defy power, disrupt oppression, and dare to resist. These figures, in many traditions, are known as tricksters. One such figure is Miriam, the sister of Moses, a woman who embodies the cunning, leadership, and prophetic defiance of the trickster spirit. But she's not alone. She brings other women along. Together, Miriam, the midwives, and other female tricksters formed a collective of women who resisted an oppressive system, not only to protect and defend life, but to ensure the liberation of the community and themselves. Miriam and the other women do not just guide the people through the Red Sea. She leads, ensuring no one is left behind. After crossing, she picks up a tambourine and sings, dancing in defiant joy. This is more than a celebration. It is an act of prophetic resistance, claiming for justice and the fullness of life. Miriam's story shows us that the trickster spirit is not just about survival. It is about women's role in leadership, communal liberation, and mujerista lucha. In our current historical moment, who are today's tricksters? Who dances in the face of fear? Who speaks when silence is expected? Undocumented immigrants, through the collective voices of allyship, through art and spiritual safe spaces. Their ability to survive against legal frameworks designed to divide and erase them is an act of holy resistance. Like the Israelites crossing the Red Sea, they navigate obstacles that threatens their very existence. Yet, the trickster spirit is not always loud. Sometimes it moves in silence. Not all resistance is spoken. Sometimes it is in what is withheld. Today, undocumented immigrants are told to know their rights, and the first thing they are advised to do when encountering with ICE agents is to remain silent. Silence, in this case, is not submission. It is survival, strategy, and defiance. It is resistance. Silence itself becomes a trickster move, one that protects, that subverts, and preserves life. In my own research, I sought to hear the audience voices through the airwaves of Catholic Spanish language radio, particularly Latina women. But their voices were not directly heard on the air. And yet, they were still acting, still resisting, still surviving. The trickster finds ways to be heard even when silenced. Just as radio waves traveled invisibly, so do these women struggle in spiritualities, unseen, but still here, still rising. These collective voices reminds us that God's sovereignty breaks open the Red Seas of oppression, calling us to something greater than fear. Miriam danced despite the odds. The undocumented persist despite the fear. What does it mean for us to embrace the trickster spirit in a time of fear and division? Perhaps it means daring to sing when silence is demanded. Perhaps it means daring to cross seas and borders that others say should not be crossed. La lucha, hear me out, is not struggle as something being hard to do. It is poder. It is power and affirmation of agency that sí se puede. Yes, we can. It is what Miriam did when she worked alongside her mother and Pharaoh's daughter. It is what the midwives did when they defied Pharaoh's orders. And it is what the undocumented and their allies do today, finding ways to survive, to strategize, to resist. Even in silence, even in invisibility, the spirituality of la lucha. So let us walk, let us sing, let us defy fear, let us unite, because God is already parting the sea in you and me.
Thank you for listening. Please visit us again for our next installment of Advocate. We celebrate the work undertaken by Sandra, Bob, Elsie, Mayra, and people across the U.S. Thank you.